Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, editor-in-chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to the second episode in a six-part series on creating resilient supply chains through IT innovation, presented by Deloitte Consulting. Today, we're talking about innovations in supply chain planning and optimization, and the topic is smart warehousing, robotics, automation, sensors, and RFID, radio frequency identification. One quick note, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, we've seen more change in warehousing and distribution in the last 5 years than in the previous 35. Companies today are struggling with multiple logistics challenges, including labor shortages and a lack of supply chain visibility. Meanwhile, customers are demanding 1 to 2 day delivery and absolute order accuracy. The pre-pandemic distribution network wasn't designed to accommodate these current challenges. So today, we're going to explore the technology that leading companies are using to improve warehouse efficiency, speed, and accuracy, including automation, cobots, sensors, and RFID. With that, I want to introduce our speaker for today, Chris Riemann is Managing Director and Logistics Practice Leader at Deloitte Consulting, LLP. He has more than 30 years of experience in supply chain management for retail and consumer products companies in both consulting and industry. His expertise includes warehouse management system and transportation management system implementation, RFID evaluation and design, supply chain transformation strategy, logistics cost reduction, DC optimization, and import and domestic transportation systems. With that, I want to pass it on to Chris Riemann. Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. So over like the next 35 minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about robotics and primarily automation and RFID. So going to kind of talk about initially, what's driving some of these things, and then talk about some of the automation technologies, RFID, and then what we recommend folks do in order to start their journey with either automation, RFID, or sensors. So if we take a look at robotics and automation, from some of the work that we've been doing with MHI, we're finding that people are going to be adopting robotics and automation probably 3 times more 5 years than they are currently, and we've been seeing that trend probably for about the last 4 or 5 years as automation has really picked up, especially in the retail and consumer packaged goods industries. Similarly, with sensors and RFID, we're finding a similar pattern, and where I would say barcoding has been around for a long time, and quite frankly, so is RFID, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. Folks are really looking to increase their adoption of that as well. And although I don't know, I would probably think that this has been pretty static for many years, especially with RFID, which is one of those technologies that I think has a lot of potential, but has not necessarily caught on in many industries just yet. So with that, when we take a look at some of the automation growth drivers, we are finding that companies, are investing a lot in supply chain technology. The quote from Bob on it's been, I've seen more in the last 5 years than the last 35. I've been around for 35 years, and I think really it's been the last 5 years that there's been this proliferation of automation, and I often kind of wonder about that, if it is that the technology has been got to the point where it's you're able to do this, or it's where the necessity for automation has really driven the technology. Not really sure, other than almost every client that I'm working with right now is looking to put automation in their warehouses, and even some of them are looking to put automation in their stores as well. So when we look at kind of the benefits of automation, I think probably a couple of the big ones here are the reduced labor costs. I think everybody is acutely aware of the labor shortage. Folks just don't want to work in warehouses anymore. I've been working in warehouses for pretty much my entire life, and quite frankly, they are normally, unless you're in a freezer, pretty hot, pretty dusty, tough work. So, we've been seeing warehouse labor rates in terms of what they're paying folks going up, which is making technology, more appealing. The other piece, and Bob touched on this briefly, is really, the increased order fulfillment and increased accuracy. So it's critical that, you receive an order and it is accurate, and that you don't have to deal with, returning it, as well as getting it really quick. I think, when I first started in this business, 35 odd years ago, it was pretty common where if you're doing mail order, which it was called back then, it would be 5 to 7 business days to get your package. That's not acceptable now, and it really is, 1 to 2 day delivery is the expectation. And then really the final one is improved safety. And I think a lot of people will probably say, well, you're using robots, how's that improve safety? Warehouses are not necessarily a safe environment. They're safe, but things can go wrong. I've seen, folks injured with pallets falling. There are plenty of instances where folks have been hurt by forklifts. Going to automation definitely does reduce a lot of that. And even the cobots, which we'll talk about a little bit, have sensors that allow them to avoid, hitting humans and injury. So let's talk about the automation technologies, and I'm going to go into details on a couple of these, not all. And this also is not an all-inclusive list. It's just a lot of what we're currently, have seen or are seeing, in the industry. And I've broken them up into, pretty much 3 major categories. One is for, split case and units. The other one is for full cases, and then finally for pallets. So, for split case and units, what we've seen in the past is, A-frames, we've seen automated sorters, goods to picker or goods to person technology with the, automated shelving. What we're seeing more of now is these automated bin robots. I liken them to a hive, and we'll get into a little bit more detail on that, as well as cobots and even some robotic unit picking, which is starting to gain a little bit of momentum. In terms of full case, the mini load cranes were very popular back, probably 15, 20 years ago. But now we're really seeing, I guess, 3 main technologies, and they're all coming together, which is, depalletizing, case shuttle, and then robotic palletizing. And then finally on pallets, which have been around, forever, you have your pallet automatic storage and retrieval systems, your pallet shuttles. And finally, kind of talking about a couple of other technologies, which is vision systems and drones, both of which can work together to really help with, warehousing automation. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bob.
Barcode label printers from Brother. Streamlining your warehouse starts at a surprisingly simple place, the barcode label printer. Brother helps push the boundaries of what the barcode can accomplish with printers that are fast, easy to integrate, and simple to maintain, and some of the most affordable pricing in the industry, backed by Brother's unmatched warranties. For a more organized, faster-moving labeling operation, check out Brother. Printers are in stock and ready to ship. For more information, go to brothermobilesolutions.com. FastFetch has developed patented game-changing systems that blend voice, light-directed, and wireless barcode scanning technologies into agile order fulfillment solutions. These solutions, based on artificial intelligence and proprietary hardware, optimize the picking and packing processes to result in 2x to 10x increases in productivity while achieving virtually 100% accuracy. FastFetch's solution suite, there are light-directed batch pitching carts coupled with light-directed bays, put walls, pick cells, reverse logistics, dynamic put walls, dynamic slotting, and IntelliPack. Learn more at fastfetch.biz.
Okay, so going back to automation technologies, I'm going to start with three of the ones we talked a little bit about before. One is robotic unit picking, and this is, really having robotic arms that either have suction or grasping individual units. So, we are seeing some more of this with e-com, the each picking, Marlin footwear. Where it doesn't necessarily work really well is with irregular sized products. The grasping isn't that great. A lot of these do use vision to try and make sure that the product that they are picking is the correct product. Now I've seen, some of the videos on this and, seen some of the numbers that they're coming up with in terms of pick per hour. It still is probably not quite what you get from a user doing the picking, but it is, getting much closer, and there are a lot of advances in this on a yearly basis. And quite frankly, this is one of the things that is pretty complex in terms of how to do the picking, how to make sure you're not picking more than one and you're picking the correct product. So I think, even though you're probably not seeing a lot of this in the warehouses, this is something that you will be seeing in future years as the technology becomes, more advanced. Cobots is another one. So, and what cobots typically are is these units with bins on them that are following pickers or going to certain pick slots, waiting for pickers, and you're picking to the cobot, which after it's been picked to will go to typically the next area. So they're robots that are really meant to work with the people. So these are really good, I would say, for, again, e-com and each picking. You're probably not going to make a lot of sense for the fast moving items, but certainly for the slow moving items, because when you're doing picking and you have a user that is walking from location to location, really the longest piece of that is your travel time, and the better pick density you have, the quicker the travel time is going to be. And these, by allowing you to pick multiple orders, at a single time, are trying to improve that pick density. So there are a number of vendors who are doing this, and a lot of different options with these cobots. And again, I think you're going to see more of this, not just with the picking, but with other technologies allowing users and robots to work together. And then, finally, it's the automated bin warehouses or bin robots. And these are, I liken them to a hive, where you have a kind of cart that hovers over location and then picks a tray out of that location, and these trays can be stacked 10 high, if not more, and then moves that tray to the picker, who will then pick from it. So it's great for high number of SKUs, low, I would say, probably low density of SKUs. The nice thing about these is they are expandable. So if you decide that you want to expand this, it's you could expand onto these hives. And this is pretty mature. So we're actually seeing this a lot with e-com companies, especially those, like I said, that do have a lot of SKUs, and even most recently in some grocery applications for buy online, pick up in store. Moving on, we can talk about these next technologies that are typically implemented together. And, quite frankly, we're seeing a lot of, retailers and grocers and CPG companies, really exploring this technology. And pretty much what it is you come from the receiving dock with a pallet. The depalletizer is going to depallet the cartons, and your case shuttle is going to store the cartons individually, and then at the end, based upon an order, you're going to have a robot actually palletize those onto a mixed pallet. So if you can think about it within a grocery operation, a lot of what happens there is you have single pallets coming in. You have somebody on a double pallet jack who's going to go and pick those products onto one or either pallet, and then it gets shipped. This is similar, but you have a robot to do it. And really, these technologies to a degree have been around for a while. I think what is making these so applicable now is quite frankly that what's behind these technologies. It's really the brains behind these that are allowing them to determine how to build a pallet in the best way possible, so that it's structural, that it is zoned by different store locations. And one of the issues that I saw, at least early in my career, is when you've had automation for palletized loads, you never really built a very good pallet. What these systems do is they build a very, very good pallet, understanding the X, Y, and Z coordinates of the product. So we are seeing a lot of companies, really adopt this technology, and this is for any company where you're pretty much stocking single pallets and shipping out mixed pallets of product. And then finally, talk a little bit about vision and drones. And vision can either be Google glasses or stationary units that are going to similar to what you do with your eyes, view pallets or products and be able to understand what's on that pallet, either for receiving or shipping. So this is really something that's very new. I don't think it's quite there yet, but is getting there. But kind of some of the use cases for this are being able to just bring a pallet in off the out of the trailer and have the vision system determine, okay, based on the carton markings, this is what the product is, and then actually direct somebody to put it away. I mean, really, with vision systems, it might eliminate the need to have barcodes in the warehouse, although that is much in the future. The other one is drones. So I think drones are already being used in a couple applications. One of them in the warehouse is empty pallet counts. Another one is with yard management, determining what trailers are on the lot and where. This can be, really implemented, or typically is implemented with vision systems that allow the drone to see. Some new applications that I think are really going to make this even more popular is the ability for the drone to either perform a cycle count by counting the cartons in a location, or by having a remote picture to somebody in an office location who's able to manipulate the drone to see the cartons on the pallet and be able to do the count. But I think this will definitely be something you see a lot more of, and this is definitely going to help with performing cycle counts a lot more frequently. So let's kind of talk about the systems that support automation. I think there are three main type systems. The one is your traditional warehouse management system. There are tons of these out there, and this is really your traditional four-wall support. These systems will typically integrate with the automation, but they don't typically direct the automation directly. They can send orders, they can send the information, but they're not what actually causes the automation to operate. That's typically the warehouse control system, which is really exists between the WMS and the PLCs, and it typically is going to orchestrate product within a type of automation. So if you have, say a tilt tray sorter, if you have an ASRS, if you have a put wall, it's going to, a single WCS is going to operate those, and they're going to, talk back with the WMS. There are some WCSs that do span multiple systems. That's especially around, picking operations, but typically they're just controlling them. There's not a lot of, intelligence there. The interesting one, kind of depending who you listen to, is the warehouse execution systems. And I think this is something that, if you ask two people what a warehouse execution system is, you're going to get three answers, because it's somewhat nebulous. I've heard everything from, warehouse execution system controls all the automation in a warehouse, and, eventually will make warehouse management systems, unneeded, to what I like to think of as a warehouse execution system, which is really automation optimization. And that is, it manages, the multiple WCSs or the multiple automations to optimize them. A good example is one that I saw about a year ago, where it operated, a tilt tray system, a put wall, and some other operations, some picking operations. And what this system was able to do is sense and understand that, okay, if I'm behind on the put wall, then, I need to slow down the operations that are feeding it. Likewise, if I'm ahead of where I'm supposed to be, it would ramp this up. So that knowledge of, the productivity is really allowing that to think and to optimize, the productivity in the facility. But this is still an emerging technology that I think, you'll see a lot of folks talking about in the years to come. And then, finally, how to get started with it. So I think, it's important to understand what different solutions are out there, and obviously, what you're trying to solve. Do the analytics around it, talk to companies who have put it in and understand, what their experience has been, what benefits have they received, from it, whether there's productivity, accuracy and speed, and then, really understand, what your benefits will be, and then understand how this is going to work within the context of your operation with your systems. So with that, let's go into RFID, and I've been involved in RFID for over 20 years ago. My first exposure to RFID was probably 35 years ago. But RFID has actually been around for a long time, and it's a pretty simple system. Pretty much you have a tag, generally an antenna / reader. The tag is going to contain information on it that pertains specifically to that tag. So it's very much like a UPC with serialized information, or a serial number in there that allows you to identify a unique unit versus just a SKU. The reader is going to read the tag and then report it to the software that you're running. Two primary types of tags. One is a passive tag, and pretty much what that does is it uses the power, from the reader to reflect back the tag ID, and those are pretty much low cost tags. Those are the ones that you see, pretty frequently in retail. They're also the tags if you've ever run a race, that you either put on your shoe or you have on your bib, that's going to be recording where you are at different points of the race, and making sure that you don't cheat, like the Rosie Ruiz incident in the Boston Marathon. And for those of you who are a lot younger than me, Google that. It's an interesting story, but really enabling you to understand where you are on the course, and it even sends back this information to folks who have logged on to your bib number. And then even pets, for a long time, pets have had RFID tags implanted, so if they get lost, you're immediately able to find the owner. The other application is active tags, and unlike a passive tag, which doesn't send its signal unless it gets excited, pass or active tags are continuously saying, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there, and sending out a signal. So where you really see active tags are on, high-end products that can absorb the price of the active tags, and where you need a longer read range, or your typical read range for a tag is 3 to 5 feet, maybe less depending upon the frequency. Active tags are a lot further, and you get to operate them at higher speeds. So, if you live in any of the states, that have tollways, I live in New Jersey, so we have plenty of them. We have Easy Pass, and that's an active tag system that, as I, go through the Jersey Turnpike or the Parkway, it's reading my tag information and then billing me appropriately. So what makes RFID kind of special versus barcodes? One thing is you can have more information on them than you can on barcodes. They're much more difficult to counterfeit, and they can be read through, cartons, through pallets, with some reservations on that, because you can't always read everything. That's been one of the issues with RFID, but in a lot of cases, you can actually see through cartons and read what's in the cartons with the RFID tag. So it's not limited to contact or line of sight. One of the applications we've seen with RFID has been in retail, especially in apparel, where being able to quickly and accurately understand the garments that are on a rounder, or the garments that are on a shelf, it's just a lot more accurate than scanning it yourself. So a lot of opportunity there in terms of RFID versus your typical barcodes. And RFID has been around for a long time. It's been around since the 1940s, where it was used in the military. I don't think you really saw it probably popping up that much until the 90s, with some of the tagging on the pets and the automated toll systems. Early 2000s, there were a lot of RFID pilots and supplier mandates, which had limited success. And now it's starting to grow again. And what we are seeing folks use RFID for is specific applications, where I think in the early 2000s, it was almost a one-size-fits-all. Now we're starting to see folks, especially retailers, really looking for specific products where RFID is going to have a benefit, versus trying to say, okay, we're going to apply RFID to everything.
Geodis is one of the fastest growing 3PLs in the US, managing the supply chains for some of the most well-known brands globally. With its complementary lines of business, including supply chain optimization, freight forwarding, contract logistics, distribution and express, and road transport, Geodis offers clients a unique skill set at each step of the supply chain. With a network spanning 170 countries, Geodis provides customized end-to-end solutions to help clients overcome their logistical constraints. Learn more at geodis.com. Advanced technology plays an increasingly vital role in today's e-commerce and omni-channel warehouses. When engineering, warehousing, and fulfillment solutions, Saddle Creek Logistics Services works with you to find the best technologies to ensure peak performance for scale for growth and fluctuations. They offer robust systems, large-scale mechanization, automation, and robotics, and they continually explore new options. By strategically applying technology, they'll help you meet your customers' demands today and tomorrow. Learn more at sclogistics.com. Okay, so taking a look at RFID, we normally look at the applicability of RFID across, I would say 5 key factors. One is the price of the product, the margin, if it's regulated or not,
reusability, which is how many times the tag can be used, and then managed, which is how strong is the current inventory management. So in taking a look across different industries, I would say, and we talked a little bit about consumer and retail, it's a mixed bag there, right? I think that in certain product categories like apparel, electronics, HBC, it makes a lot of sense. In other ones, which are typically your lower margin products, probably not as realistic. Travel, transportation, good opportunity there. I think a lot of folks are actually using that, and IATA, which maintains the airline industry, is pushing for that as well. Medical devices, again, seeing a good impact there, especially on serialized and shelf life products. Same with pharmaceuticals. High tech, again, high margins, high costs, good RFID applications. Lost products there can be expensive. And then others that we've seen is asset tracking, and I'm going to go into these in a little bit more detail. So if we take a look at cost, right? If we take a look at how much the product costs, again, consumer product retail, it's kind of a mixed bag. Travel and transportation, there are some airlines that are actually putting RFID tags on luggage and using that to track your bag, so when product is put on the plane, when it's been taken off the plane, and so on. So that's a good example of where we have seen RFID, although not every airline is currently using it. In taking a look at some of the other medical devices, yeah, I mean, those things are extremely expensive, and to put an RFID tag on them is really not, doesn't compromise, the margin that much. And, again, on margin, consumer product retail, it varies. There are some products that have huge margin, some products that have very little margin. The RFID tag, even though they've come down in price dramatically, still has a big impact on how viable it's going to be. And then you have medical devices, pharmaceutical, high tech, again, very high margin on them, so they're very applicable, and there's less of an impact there. Regulated, being in a regulated environment, definitely helps RFID and being able to justify it, especially around pharmaceutical, where a lot of products are regulated, and now there's even more regulation planned around fresh products and fresh produce. And actually talking with a grocer around how they can use RFID to track products, understand expiration date, and even give information on product that's on the shelf or in the back room in terms of when does that expire and what the lot code is. A lot of the benefit of RFID is it does allow you to understand what the lot is of a product. So if you can imagine some of these recall situations that are popping up pretty frequently, if you're able to understand what lot is at issue, you could be very selective about taking product out of the supply chain or off the shelf, versus what's being done now is generally you're just taking all of that product off. Reusability, again, that has to do with how many times can a tag be used. So with consumer product, it's once. With travel and transportation, it can be many, many times depending upon what you're tagging. So the more times you use it, the more times you're actually spreading the cost over multiple tags. And quite frankly, in some travel and transportation industries, that's where we're seeing those active tags being used a lot more. Medical devices and pharmaceuticals, it's typically, it's being consumed at that point. And then managed, this is really how well something's being managed. And I think in a lot of cases, product might not be well managed. Say with consumer products and retail. DC, well-managed store, not so much. So a lot of what we've seen, within, retail applications is, more store level than warehouse level. And then, travel and transportation, typically is pretty well managed, although one could argue with bags on the planes. But with barcoding, a lot of folks are managing it maybe at a slightly higher price. And then, one of the interesting ones we've seen is around medical devices. For those of you who don't know why sales reps typically drive very large SUVs, it's not because they like to drive very large SUVs, it's because they have trunk stock. They actually have product, in their trunk, and for emergency. So that's another way that you can understand, okay, what's in that trunk and actually, manage it like a warehouse location. So to kind of close on this, your supply chain solution, whether you're going with RFID, whether you're going with automation, whether you're going with robotics, it's really not a one size fits all. You need to take a look at what makes sense in your operation, and what types of automation or remote sensing is really necessary to try and solve your problems. I think a lot of it's overwhelming now, and there are so many options out there that it can really be difficult to understand what's there. So it does take a lot of research, and typically somebody to kind of guide you through that to try and understand what's the best solution to your problem.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that really deep dive into some of this critical technology that we're seeing in modern day warehouses and how they can be of help. I do want to move into sort of a panel discussion sort of thing here, where I ask you a few questions and ask you maybe to elaborate on some of the things you talked about earlier, starting with the fact that you yourself pointed out that RFID has indeed been around in some form or another for at least 80 years. Why has it not caught on quickly?
I think a lot of that problem has been, the cost of the RFID tag, which in the last, 10 to 15 years has come down, dramatically. I think, some of the issues have also been the overhype of it. I think, if I take a look when I first got involved, quite frankly, when I first saw my RFID ad probably 35 years ago, it was promising, you can just, walk down the aisle with this reader and it would read everything that's in the carton, which wasn't, feasible then, probably is not 100% feasible now either. So I think that, and also kind of the one size fits all approach, trying to use RFID across multiple product types without really understanding which ones are more or better for RFID from a readability and from a benefit perspective. And I think companies have really taken a step back from RFID and are now starting to advance on it, but in certain areas and on certain type products.
Yeah, I mean, even back then, some years ago, when Walmart mandated RFID on some of the products that its vendors were bringing in, that didn't seem to do the trick in terms of widespread adoption. But it's interesting. You should talk about maybe some of the challenges that have been involved in making it giving it more of a presence in warehouses. I'm also wondering, visual recognition is a big deal now, linked to AI and the like, and I'm wondering if that might serve as an option to RFID.
Yeah, so I think in certain circumstances, vision can replace RFID, and actually is replacing RFID. Mm-hmm. So, if you're taking a look at, the toll systems, which I brought up before, a lot of them are going to reading the actual license plate. So you don't need an RFID tag on your car. You register, it reads the license plate, and it bills you accordingly. So I think, in that instance, where there's a direct line of sight, you're going to see probably RFID becoming less prevalent, as we go forward. In other areas, I don't think it will be. In the example of being able to kind of read what's in a carton, especially from a QA standpoint, vision systems are never going to be able to really do that, or don't see them doing that in the near future. RFID will, because it's able to see the unseen and see within the carton. So I think it's going to be kind of a mixed bag. I think, vision systems can definitely, maybe not in my lifetime, but eventually will replace the barcode. Being able to identify, product, or, a specific bag or a specific container, by looking at it versus, having a some type of barcode or RFID tag on it.
You provided us with a pretty good list of decision-making criteria on whether to apply RFID in certain situations. But I'm wondering, first of all, based on what you just said, is it a possibility that if I have a warehouse without anything like that, should I just wait for the next big odd thing to come along, not spend all this money on a technology that's going to be obsolete? Or might my facility just not be sophisticated enough to even merit RFID? Are there times when RFID just might not be the right move for me at this point in time?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen is there are different options, and kind of replaying the air carriers, right? I fly a lot. I fly on different carriers. I get notifications, when I do check a bag in terms of when it's been on the plane. The technology is being used as different. One I know uses RFID, another one uses barcodes. So there are different options there. I think from a perspective of kind of where to apply it, with warehousing, we have not seen a lot of benefit for RFID, right? It just has not necessarily been there, primarily because barcodes are just really, really good at what they do, and it doesn't take very long to scan a barcode. So most of the benefits that we've seen within RFID are not necessarily within the warehouse itself, but in the downstream applications. Probably some exceptions to that would be product that is extremely expensive or is highly regulated, such as some of your opiates and products like those need to be very, very heavily regulated. You need to know what goes in and out of the vault that they're in, and they need to be cycled kind of on a daily basis. So those are some examples of where RFID would be practical, but in most cases, it's just not practical to put a reader on every location,
right. Okay.
or to replace a barcode scanner with an RFID reader. It's you're not going to get the bang for the buck there.
Right. Chris, you did a really good job of helping to clear up the confusion between a WMS, a WCS, and a WES. But I'm wondering, ultimately, might a WES, that is a warehouse execution system, as you described it, be a replacement for a WMS?
Yeah, so I think eventually, I don't think we're at that tipping point yet, and with most warehouses, but I think after you get to a certain point and you've automated enough of the processes, and the manual processes are what I would say, not as prevalent, then yeah, I think then you're to a point where WES just needs to add on some ancillary functions in order for it to be pretty much functioning as a WMS. And in the example of those the depalletizer, the carton storage, the repalletizer, in some of those type warehouses, if that's all that's being done, and it's never that simple, because there are products that just can't go on automation because they're too big or too small. Yeah, you just have to put in the receiving functionality, the shipping functionality, and in essence, you have a warehouse management system. So I think in some cases, as automation becomes more prevalent, you will see warehouse execution systems become, possibly running the warehouse. But I think that is down the road a little bit. And, manual processes are always going to need to be managed, and typically that's best managed through a WMS.
Thank you. I want to bring the audience in at this point, because we do have a lot of good audience questions for you, Chris. So let's start with the audience Q&A portion of our presentation here. With this question: as far as warehouse operation is concerned, agility and flexibility are not always assured by automation, which tends to be rigid and with capacity limitations. How do you see automation versus agility and flexibility?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and quite frankly, a lot of the warehouses that I've been in, especially ones that were designed in the in like the 80s, where they've had ASRS in there. They've run into problems where if they wanted to take that ASRS and move it towards a more manual operation in order to gain speed, they really couldn't, because there's no flexibility in it, and I've seen a lot of areas where it was just dark and not operative. So the two really don't go together. I do think with cobots, however, that does give you some agility in terms of you can use your existing layout and just bring in cobots, and they can work alongside workers without a lot of investments, which I think is one of the reasons why cobots are really so interesting. We are, however, seeing more and more automation being installed in existing facilities. And it used to be where if you wanted to have automation, especially the ASRSs or the carton storage units, you had to plan for them when you constructed the building. Not so anymore. We are seeing companies retrofit existing facilities with those automations, and I've worked with several companies that have done that and pretty successfully. So the agility with automation, or the lack of agility with automation, is still there, but it has gotten better.
Certainly, we are seeing some robotics companies offer this idea of robots as a service, where you can scale up or down on the number of robots you have in a facility depending on the season. So that certainly would indicate some aspect of flexibility there. We didn't talk too much about sustainability so far, and this questioner is asking about the impact of automation technology in sustainable supply chain. What is the connection there, if any?
I think within a sustainable supply chain, RFID does have some applicability. It's a question I've really never been asked before, or really haven't given much thought to. I think that was automation, right, Bob? Not RFID.
Yes. Yeah.
I think with automation, it definitely gives an option to try and at least pack things a little bit differently and receive things differently. I think with some of these products, if it is going to go into bins or trays, which are typically reusable, there's no reason why you couldn't receive those directly from the manufacturer like that, and induct them directly in, eliminating the need to have corrugate boxes or other type products. So I think there's definitely some applicability there. I haven't seen a lot, or haven't seen that necessarily being a driver of automation.
Okay. This questioner says, in a high volume dry grocery operation where you're picking 200 cases an hour or shipping 200,000 cases a day, it seems like the ASRS solutions are too expensive, take too long to retrofit into existing facilities, need too much time to obtain ROI. Truly autonomous picking robots don't have the AI needed to pick autonomously, and they don't seem to pick fast enough. What are your thoughts on this type of warehouse operation?
Yeah, I would say if we're talking each picking, it's not there yet, right? It's not to the point where it is a high volume pick. But if we're talking about primarily pallet in, case out operations, to where you're in a wholesale environment, or where you're shipping to stores, that's where we've seen a lot of companies actually invest in these technologies. And they are able to retrofit in the existing facilities, and they are able to get out some pretty fast speeds there. Now, I think there is a trade-off a little bit further down the road, especially if you're floor loading to stores. The trade-off between floor loading and pallets, because pallets, you are going to be shipping more air. But with some of the companies that have adopted this, they're finding that really the benefits on the receiving end at the stores is actually making up for that additional cost. So I think that speed, if it's not there yet with certain types of automation, is certainly getting there.
Thank you. Here's another kind of offshoot of the sustainability issue, and this is about what happens to RFID tags once they serve their purpose. Is there a way they can be repurposed or reused? Are there any reverse supply chain arrangements to return the tags to the primary user?
Yeah, so typically RFID tags can be reused. There are RFID tags that have a kill switch on them, which pretty much renders them unusable after a certain point. But they can be reused, and we do see especially where you're having them on containers, whether they're plastic totes or larger containers, being able to reuse them over and over again. In terms of if you're tagging, a pair of jeans, not so much. They're typically, either in the pocket or on the price tag. So, I haven't seen any big, movement towards actually the recycling of RFID tags, but it's not a bad idea.
Here are two questions with regard to floor-loaded containers. You alluded to them briefly just now, basically asking what automation have you seen, or have you seen any new technologies to unload floor-loaded containers rather than hiring lumpers, who of course are human beings, very often the drivers who are asked to unload their own trucks?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's something that has been around for a long time in terms of hiring the lumpers, or you have the driver unload, and drivers like to drive, they don't like to unload.
Right.
So there are some technologies out there, and we have seen some technologies that will unload a trailer and will unload cartons on a trailer. Now, how well they do that in terms of really densely packed trailers, I don't know, but there are technologies out there that can do that, and I have seen some instances of where that is being used. So I think it's definitely something that's worth looking into. A lot of product obviously is received on pallets, which wouldn't apply, but floor-loaded trailers, yeah, there is some technology that enables you to actually receive it and then subsequently sort it.
Okay, thank you. In a multi-facility warehouse, now this is a drones question, using drones for part picking has challenges like navigating between aisles and picking parts with bigger dimensions. Is there a solution to customize drones for those purposes?
Yeah, so I haven't necessarily seen drones for picking. I've typically seen the applications of it being for doing inspection or cycle counting. But I mean, there are a lot of different drones out there, right? So I would suspect that there are different drones that allow you to do picking of different products. Just like the drones that you have that they're testing with delivery are going to be different than the drones that you have in a warehouse environment that are doing picking. So there are different options there in terms of what they can do and how much they can lift.
Okay. This is a question about any solutions for robotics, specifically in cold chain warehousing. Those are some unique requirements. Are we seeing some advances there?
Yeah, so with cold chain, some of the technologies that I've talked about in terms of those hive storage systems, and also the depalletized carton storage, case storage, and then palletization, they can exist in cold storage locations. So we've seen examples of where they are used in both ambient, also used in cooler, and then in freezer type environments where you're at negative degrees. So they can operate in those environments. They just need to be hardened to a degree for the colder environments.
Okay, thanks for that. This questioner is asking about the application of 5G, private networks, and smart warehousing for AMRs, AR/VRs, drones, and other type of use cases. Where's 5G in all this picture right now?
It's emerging. We actually, Deloitte actually has a smart warehouse or smart factory, smart warehouse that we use that's employing 5G technology. So it's there. I want to say it's not quite being as widely used yet. but it's there, and a lot of the RF vendors and some of the other sensor vendors are or do have 5G options. I think 5G does make a lot of sense, especially considering that with many of the warehouse operations, you're kind of limited by the spread of the antennas and the network, to where this is going to allow you to have a much larger area that you can operate in.
Okay. Oh, unfortunately, we're just about out of time, Chris. We have time for one more question. It's a good one, considering the huge scope of technology that you have covered in this last hour. Could be very intimidating for a warehouse operation. The question is, how should someone get started on this journey?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is determine the problem that you're trying to solve, right? What's the issue? And then from there, try and look at what the different options are. And there are a lot of them. There are probably multiple options. If you're talking about each picking on, solving that, do you want to go with, goods to person type system? Do you want to go with a cobot? Do you want to go with some robotic picking? But, try and first identify the problem versus taking a look at the technology, getting really excited and trying to understand where you can apply it. It's kind of like a hammer looking for a nail. And that can get very intimidating because there is such a proliferation of technology out there. Like I said a little bit earlier, talk with the vendors, talk with folks who have implemented this before, try and understand what their experiences have been, what the technology has done well, what it hasn't done well, what benefits they were able to get. And then finally, develop that business case, which really says, this is the benefits that we expect to get from the technology, and this is the payback. And these technologies are typically have a longer payback than what most folks are used to, simply because there's such an large outlay. But they really do pay for themselves, and a lot of times, you need to take a look at more than just dollars and cents. How does this increase customer loyalty? How does this increase accuracy? How does this get product to your customers quicker? So there's a lot to look at there, but definitely don't be intimidated. Don't try and figure out a technology that you like and try and understand how to apply it. Apply the technology to the problem, not the other way around.
I hate to say it, but we are out of time. Chris, that was such a great review of so much technology, so many solutions and opportunities that are out there for the modern day warehouse operation. Thank you so much, Chris Riemann of Deloitte, for reviewing that for us. I want to give you a little bit more information about how after this, as I said, this is the second episode of a 6-episode series. Stay tuned for episode 3. That will take place in November of 2022. The overall theme of the series is, of course, creating resilient supply chains through IT innovation. The next episode will focus on smart transportation, autonomous vehicles and drones, green fuel, and more. So, Chris Riemann of Deloitte, thank you so much. Audience, thank you for your attendance and for your fantastic questions. And everybody, have a great day.